everybody, welcome to the Jungle Farm. We're so excited to be here as Egg for Life, visiting with Leona, who is a pumpkin farmer, and she's going to tell us all about pumpkins today. So Leona, how long have you been a pumpkin farmer?
We have grown pumpkins for about 25 years,
Wow.
actually, so that's a long time.
Yeah, you're certainly the right person to talk to about pumpkins. So I think we should start off with, what is a pumpkin? Because in my head, I picture pumpkins as these big, round, orange vegetables, but I see we have a lot of varieties. So what makes a pumpkin, and what different types are there?
You know, that's a really good question, and the pumpkins come from a family called cucurbits. And so there's a bunch of vegetables that fit into that family, like cucumbers and squash and zucchini, and pumpkins is one of them. And I don't really know the difference between how you describe a pumpkin versus, say, a winter squash. And quite interesting, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking people who work with us, and they call it all the same term. So they actually don't differentiate between a winter squash, like a spaghetti squash or a butternut, and a pumpkin. They call it all the same thing.
That's really interesting.
You know, I think we do. We have the vision of Halloween, big orange pumpkin.
Yeah.
But let's look at some of the ones that we have as
Yeah.
different. So this is relatively new out in the sense that there was a day that only farmers would produce seeds for pumpkins that look like the traditional pumpkin, and now they produce some of these gnarly, warty pumpkins. This one's called Knucklehead. It's the variety name, and he's pretty fun. And what I love about Knucklehead is the pumpkin will turn orange, but the warts will stay green for a long time, so it can look quite cool when he starts ripening up. The other ones that I think are really quite fun is all these little decorator pumpkins, and they come in all sorts of shapes and colors, and people are decorating on their tables and putting them on their steps, and maybe even having them, you know, in a school where they could have them around, because they're just small and they're easy to carry and to do things with them. I think they're kind of fun. And another one that we don't always get to grow is our white ones, and they only like super hot summers. So
Okay.
of course we had a super hot summer, so now we've got lots of white pumpkins in our patch, and they are neat because they look white on the outside, yet the inside looks exactly the same as an orange pumpkin. It'll be nice and orange inside.
Okay, that's really interesting. So do all these different colors and sizes, do they come from different seeds, or are they just different life stages of the pumpkin?
So all the ones I just picked up all come from a different seed.
Okay.
And as you would expect, this seed is going to look smaller than this seed.
Right.
So this one's going to be quite a bit bigger seed of pumpkins than this one, because of course the seeds are sitting right inside the pumpkin. So if we were to split this open, we would actually see all the seeds inside the pumpkin, and those are where the pumpkins actually grow from, is the seeds that are inside the pumpkin. So they all come from different seeds because they're all different. They've got different names, just like everybody has a different name. Like my name's Leona and yours is not. Same as this pumpkin is called Blaze, and this one's called Knucklehead.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I heard you call that little guy you were holding a decorator pumpkin. Is there a difference between the pumpkins that we eat and the pumpkins we use to decorate at Thanksgiving or Halloween?
So yes and no. Can you eat this little dude? Yes, you can. It's just he doesn't have very much flesh in here. So he's not going to make a very big pot of soup or a pie because there's not much in him. And that's why I think they call them decorators, or why I call them decorators. Whereas the other big ones, they do have lots more flesh.
Okay, so I could cook something with this big guy then.
Yes.
Amazing.
And you know what some people do, which I think would be really fun, is they make pumpkin soup, which is one of my favorites. And then they hollow this out, and they use this as their bowl.
That's very fun.
It would be very fun to do it. But there is a special pumpkin that's just for making pies. He looks like this, and he's called a pie pumpkin because he's higher in sugar, denser flesh, and drier. So he makes the perfect pie, whereas that guy's going to be a little softer, and he's going to make an okay pie.
Okay, that's good to know for my pie making days. So I think we should talk about, how do pumpkins grow? Because I know they grow from a seed, But do you plant them all by hand? Is there a big machine that does it for you?
So we start all the pumpkins from a seed in our greenhouse, and every one gets planted into a little hole of dirt. So they're called cells. And we put each pumpkin into that little cell. We make sure he gets watered, they get some sunshine and get warm. And once they start getting warm, the pumpkin germinates, the seed germinates, which means he starts to grow and he sticks little leaves up above the ground. So the water is going to be drank by the pumpkin through its roots. So it's going to stick its little roots into the soil, and it's going to drink water it's like a straw. So it goes and sucks that water up the root, and then the leaves can pop up above. The sun shines down on those leaves. It makes energy, so you and I are going to eat a granola bar to have energy. The pumpkin plant is going to use the sun to make some energy inside of it, and it can grow bigger and bigger. So these start like this big in a little cell of dirt, and look how big they are now. Every plant is taller than our average kindergarten student.
Yeah.
Yes, so they're very, very big. The plants are very big, and they just need more water from the bottom, more sun from the top, and they just keep growing big until they start to make flowers. So when they start blooming flowers, then that flower will need a special helper. It's going to need some bees to come along and visit the flowers, because that bee has two really important jobs. It's going to pollinate the flower by moving from flower to flower and moving the pollen from flower to flower, so we make pumpkins, but it's also going to take the nectar back to its hive to make honey.
Oh, amazing. Two very important jobs.
Very important.
So when it's going from flower to flower, is there like a special order it needs to go in, or like, are there different flowers that come up on the pumpkin vine?
There sure is. So pumpkins have a male flower and a female flower. So typically I don't think the bee knows the difference, because the nectar and the pollen to them is really same, right? So they're looking really for the nectar. But the male flower is just going to have a stem in the flower, whereas the female flower is going to have a little tiny baby pumpkin, and the flower is going to come off the pumpkin. So if I was to look at a pumpkin and I look at the bottom of it, that's where the flower was connected to the pumpkin. And this is kind of a medium-sized, I'd say he's if we were in human years, this might be like a 5-year-old pumpkin. He's kind of just started to grow and get big and strong, and this is where his flower came from. So the bee had to come from a male flower over to the female flower to start our pumpkin. And once he starts to grow, then we need more water through those roots, more sun from the sky, and he will start to make a pumpkin that's a little bit bigger again. So this is kind of like a teenager pumpkin, and from here he's going to start to turn orange.
Okay. I see. So you've mentioned water being very important for them because they get thirsty, they need a lot of water to grow. Do you have to come out here in the field with a big watering can and water all the vines, or how do you do that?
Well, in your home garden, probably people were doing it, especially this summer when it was so hot. But for us, we're fortunate to have a little drip tube. So it's like a garden hose with holes all through it. It sits underneath our pumpkin rows. So each pumpkin row has a special plastic covering on it. So once our plants get big enough and strong enough, we pull them out of the greenhouse and we put them into this plastic. So we punch a hole and put them in the plastic, and then we can turn the water on from our dugout, which is a big pond of water, and we turn the pump on and it will bring water up and run down these tubes, and it will drip out all the way down the row of the pumpkins. So I don't have to come out with a watering can because my patch is pretty big. It would take a lot of watering cans to do that. So I'm fortunate that I can just flick a switch and it can do it for me.
That's awesome. So when do you plant the seeds and when do you harvest the pumpkins?
So pumpkins do not like cold weather. So they can't be planted when it's frosty outside. So if we think back into May, The beginning of May is a time when we start to see warmer weather, but we still get nights that are below 0, so still very cold. But once we get to the end of May, we have warm weather in the day and we don't go below 0 most years. So we plant them in our greenhouse right the last week of May, and that allows us to have them grow where it's nice and warm in our greenhouse, because of course the greenhouse is a big structure with plastic walls, and we can turn heat on it and keep them warm in there. We can't plant them too early because pumpkins grow so fast that if I plant them really early, say the beginning of May, by the end of May I would have a greenhouse full of pumpkin vines because they grow so fast. So we plant them at the end of May, and by about the 10th of June we can start planting them outside because it's warm enough to plant them. Okay. Typically, I wouldn't start picking pumpkins till the first part of September. So when students are going back to school, I start having orange pumpkins to pick. This year, because it was so hot this summer, we definitely had pumpkins at the beginning of August, ready to be picked.
So the heat really speeds it up then.
Yeah. So not every vegetable likes heat, but pumpkins is one that loves to have the hot weather.
That's amazing. Is there a trick to telling when a pumpkin is ripe? Or do you just look at the color?
Right, it's mostly color. So remember, this pumpkin here becomes like that pumpkin there. So it's the color. So we would say this one is not ripe because he is not got orange on him, but that guy is ripe. But I already showed you this one with all the warts on him, and he's not 100% orange, but because he has lots of orange on him, I know that I can pick him because he will turn orange after he's picked. Okay. So you don't have to have 100% orange, but you have to have a lot of orange showing on the pumpkin to know that they're ripe. And that means they're ready to be picked and set on a doorstep or maybe enjoyed inside their house.
Okay. What's your favorite thing about being a pumpkin farmer?
Oh, why do I love pumpkin farming? Because, you know, when my boys were really little, it's like a treasure hunt. Inside the pumpkin patch, they love to go searching because the perfect pumpkin can be found in the patch if you spend some time looking. And everyone has a different idea of what a perfect pumpkin is. So yours might be just a little guy, and the next person wants the big monster 45-pound pumpkin. So it's that treasure hunt of growing them. And they grow so fast and they're easy to grow, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So do you have any more fun pumpkin facts for us?
Well, inside of a pumpkin, it always makes me wonder how many seeds are in a pumpkin. And I've never opened them up and counted the seeds. Roasted the seeds, they're pretty yummy, but I've never counted the seeds.
Yeah, because I know when I carve pumpkins for Halloween and scoop out all the brains and guts, there's a lot of seeds in there, like too many to count almost. And every one of those would turn into a pumpkin if you planted it, right?
Yes, they sure can. And we have some pumpkins that get damaged, you know, they maybe get dropped or nicked, and so we throw them on our compost pile. And it's amazing to see the next year all these pumpkins growing on the top, because of course that compost is staying nice and warm all winter because compost creates heat. And so these little pumpkin seeds sit in there and they will grow the next spring. So there is a lot of pumpkins inside of each one of these.
That's incredible. That's, yeah, incredible that those little seeds turn into a massive pumpkin. Well, I feel like I've learned a ton about pumpkins today. Thank you so much for guiding me through this pumpkin patch. If you're interested in coming down to the jungle farm and picking your perfect pumpkin, I would really encourage you to do that because it's so fun. You can learn so much here. Thanks again, Leona, for guiding us through the pumpkin patch.
Well, I'm delighted to have all these students join us and see our patch.